Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, here got another fun and exciting video for you guys today because it seriously seems like the RPCS3 team cannot stop updating their emulator, making it better and better for basically everyone involved. Just last week I ran an update on how many things that they had actually added to the emulator, and like 2 weeks before that I had done the same video, and I absolutely love having to come back in and make more emulation videos. That means that there's been a lot of improvement and a lot of enhancements on the RPCS3 or PlayStation 3 emulation side of things. And honestly, this most recent improvement, you would never know it existed, but it is going to be fundamentally one of the best things to come to RPCS3 in 2026. Because we just recently talked about the fact that the SPU had been quote-unquote defeated and better performance across every single piece of hardware was going to be available. And again, that's one that you're never going to have to hit a setting for, it just automatically happens. But for the longest time in RPCS3, you would have to go over to the wiki and look up per game settings because some games needed to have options toggled, and some of those options were definitely nested in some very deep menus, and I would always get comments on certain games saying, "Why does your game look like this? Mine has graphical glitches or other issues in the color. How did you solve that?" That is because on the wiki you would go in and look up the best game settings for every single game and then configure them manually so that that game would run in RPCS3. Now automatically the games that you download and play on RPCS3 are going to configure themselves. It'll reference the wiki and change in real time the settings for the game you're running, and then when you run a game that needs different settings, it'll automatically do it again. That basically means you do not need to think about anything when you're playing RPCS3 and PlayStation 3 emulation. The only thing you really need to check is to make sure that the game emulates in the first place. Something like Time Crisis 4 here, if you didn't change a white setting in the actual GPU menu, you would get absolute garbage graphics and you would basically not be able to see anything whatsoever. And when I talked about Time Crisis 4 on my Time Crisis retrospective, people said I couldn't get the game to run, the graphics were completely messed up. And honestly, a lot of people didn't even know about the wiki, so it's one of those things. You can't change settings that you don't know about, so this is absolutely going to make a lot more people a lot more successful when it comes to emulating PlayStation 3. And that really is the crux of the matter. You always have to remember, and again, I have been a college professor of film and television, not everyone knows what you know. I may know about the wiki, I may know about the settings you need to change, but you could never expect or anticipate that the other person you're talking to has any of the knowledge you do. And that is why something like this is just such a fundamental shift and a great change for everyone out there. Whether you've been emulating things for decades like I have, or if you're just starting to emulate this week, it's definitely going to make a difference. Because think of it this way, if you know where all of these settings are and you know what you need to change, you still have to go in and actually do it before you sit down and start enjoying a game, which again, takes time away from your actual gameplay experience and puts it into the setup process. And we don't want to have to spend all that much time setting things up, we just want to sit down and play games. But if you have no experience on any of this, and you go in blindly and just double click a game and hope it works well, now if that game has those settings in the actual wiki, and basically all of them that run do, you'll be 100% configured, good to go, ready to play without any heavy lifting or even thinking about what's actually happening. And that again is going to bring PlayStation 3 emulation to so many more people, having so much more fun. And at this point in time, every single game is at least loadable, nothing doesn't boot, and most of the majority of the actual PlayStation 3 library is going to work perfectly fine. Now if we take a look at something like Time Crisis 4, the game that I mentioned had issues. If you didn't change the settings, you'll see here the right color buffer has to be on, and that fixes the white screen. But if people didn't know about this, they would just think Time Crisis 4 did not emulate correctly, and they would move on to try something differently. So now when you actually try to load up Time Crisis 4, again, RPCS3 will automatically configure the best settings for it, and then you'll be playing the game like you were on real PlayStation 3 hardware. And then if you go to the next game and it doesn't need that right buffer on, it'll automatically turn it off based upon the fact the wiki says that no special configuration is required. This is basically like that joke Staples easy button. You don't need to think about anything, it's the Ronco rotisserie set it and forget it of emulation, and that really is more of what we need. Now don't get me wrong, fiddling with emulation is always a fun time if you feel like it, but people out there that don't know what they're doing shouldn't be expected to have to do these deep dives. I am a firm believer in making the barrier of entry about as low as humanly possible to emulating retro games. That way more people enjoy them, and when people try to gatekeep stuff and say, well, you need to learn how to do things better, of course people can definitely still learn how to do fun things, but we should always try to actually make it easier for them as well and bring more people under the tent of retro gaming fun and not exclude them and leave them outside. And that is why these improvements really do make a difference, because people are just going to have a more fun time emulating PlayStation 3. And again, I totally get it. PlayStation 3 hardware is not hard to come by. It really isn't that expensive, and you can play around with a lot of doing different things on it for basically the cost of nothing, but that's exactly what emulation is as well. And when I say RPCS3 is absolutely dense with different configuration options, I mean it. On the CPU side alone, there's so many different decoders for the PPU and SPU, all sorts of different thread scheduling for the actual threads that are going through the CPUs. Playing around with any of these, if you do not know what they mean, you're not going to be successful. That is why the wiki is nice. It would tell you exactly what to set for each and every single game. But again, that meant you actually had to go to the wiki and even know it existed, and then configure things from there. And on the GPU configuration as well, a lot of these things, people might know what some of them are, but for a lot of them, you would have absolutely no idea. Like the right color buffer for Time Crisis 4 on or off, you would think that the color buffer would be something that would be always on, so you quote unquote get color, but that is not how it works in any way, shape, or form. But if someone just read that, you could totally understand why they think they need to leave it on the entire time, or else maybe they'd get a black and white image, at least in their imagination. And on the advanced configurator as well, there's so many different things that you could play around with and basically break games or make them run better. So I would say even more so than the SPU performance improvements that have been captured in RPCS3 in 2026, this auto configuration is going to be the most fundamental update, at least up to the time of recording this video. But it seems like the RPCS3 team cannot be stopped, so I'm sure in like a week or like 10 minutes after I publish this video, they will have something brand new to talk about that's going to make the experience even better than it already is. And honestly, I keep saying this, but the RPCS3 team is absolutely speedrunning PlayStation 3 emulation development in 2026, and it's getting incredibly good. And for a lot of the games that actually run well on RPCS3, it is now my de facto favorite way to play these games. Yes, I have a PlayStation 3. Yes, I have a very large PlayStation 3 game library. If I just want to sit down and play something on PlayStation 3, the first thing I check is to see whether or not it is completable on RPCS3. And if it is and the graphics are good, I go right over there, get better frame rates, better resolution, and just play the exact same PlayStation 3 game I know, love, and remember. I just play it on emulation, and that really is amazing. And even though there's definitely still some games that have issues out there, I played around with something like 3D Dot Game Heroes, and it can freeze. I got a freeze about 4 hours in, but I was able to bypass it. This is all going to get better as time goes on, and that is amazing, because again, you have to remember, we're talking not about 2026, but we're talking about 2046. In 20 years, PlayStation 3 hardware will definitely be a lot harder to find and more expensive. I'm not saying it's going to go extinct, I'm just going to say a lot of them are going to be broken, and something like RPCS3 will keep the PlayStation alive into eternity, because video game emulation is video game preservation, and that's always something I am going to advocate for and say on the channel. And again, all of these different configurations here, if you do want to see if a game runs or not, I still recommend going over to the wiki, and I will leave a link in the description below, because you'll see here a known issue is the fact that 3D Dot Game Heroes can freeze every once in a while. And honestly, it's gotten a lot better than where it was this time last year, where the game basically would freeze in like the first 5 or 6 minutes. Again, I've just been playing around in the background to see if it would freeze. And like I said, after about 4 hours of gameplay with saving, I finally did get it to freeze once. But it's one of those things, it'll always improve, and before you know it, maybe in 2 years, 5 years or so, and trust me, time goes by a lot faster than we'd like to admit, you'll have basically perfect emulation across the entire library of PlayStation 3. And that definitely is a future I am very excited to hear about and talk about. And again, taking this away from the actual end user, I think is a good thing, because all you're doing is going into the wiki, checking the settings, and then applying them yourself. So it's not like the RPCS3 team is making decisions for you. The emulator is now ingesting the best settings and applying them for you every single time you load up a game. And that, again, just absolutely makes such a huge difference. And it's one of those things, the better emulation, the more fun people have, and the less time they spend setting things up. Because if you're like me, you only have a couple hours a day to actually play video games, and the last thing you want to do is fight with an emulator for 45 minutes trying to Google exactly how to fix a problem, and by the time you actually get that problem sorted out, you realize, damn it, I have to get up and start making dinner or do something else, and now I've completely lost the time I had in the day to play a video game in the first place. So big credit to the RPCS3 team. I absolutely love this new change, and honestly, they've been 100% on fire when it comes to PlayStation 3 emulation in 2026. If you need an RPCS3 guide or RPCS3 tutorial to understand how to emulate PlayStation 3 games, check out my Emulation Night School playlist, because there's basically an emulation tutorial on there for every single emulator out there that you would want to play around with. But short of that, we are done. Definitely check this one out. Play Soul Calibur 5 because it's an absolute banger, especially on RPCS3. Better than real PlayStation 3 hardware, and I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.